Hey everyone, welcome. This is Jason Clemens, Doctor of Chiropractic at the Rock Health and Wellness Center, and this is Life with Jason Clemens, DC. We are live right here from the Rock Health and Wellness Center studios in Lubbock, Texas. We're live on the radio at 98.7, and we're on AM 1420 and then 987radio.com out there in the world. And we are live from social media. The Rock Health and Wellness Center is on Facebook, Jason Clemens, DC on YouTube. No. On X, and at Health from the Rock on YouTube. That's where we are. Sorry. And yeah, it's been great. It's been busy today. We've been at it since 7:30, like we always do on Wednesdays. I hope you guys have had a good day. It's beautiful out there. We talked about sunshine yesterday, getting out there in the sun, and had a few people come in today that you could tell they'd been out in the sun a little bit. So that was really good. They looked good. They're, get out there in the sunshine to get some vitamin D working for you. There's about 1,000 things that goes on in the body that vitamin D supports. We're going to talk about some of them tonight. I've got a couple of interesting articles for you. And then I just enjoyed last night so much, the second half of the show, getting into flexion and extension again. And then I had the same conversations over and over again today about flexion and extension. And so another one that I really wanted to talk about tonight was plantar fasciitis. And I know we've talked about it, but I just think it's so important to understand. And I think like maybe if we kind of feed off of the same thoughts that we had last night, that kind of how we did the lumbar work with flexion extension. And we're going to spend just a second and talk about the cervical work of flexion and extension. Then I think if we break down the foot like we broke down the low back last night, I think you might be able to understand it better. And I think we should do that because it's so that subject is so misunderstood, and people get confused about what's going on. And I got some things I want to look at. I want to warn you before we get started. We're not quite there yet, but I want to warn you that we're going to show some cadavers pictures. So if cadaver pictures bother you, I'll warn you again before I put them up, and then we can just so you can be warned. But there's great pictures right there. And I think if we look at some of those pictures, it would help for people to understand like a little bit better what's going on. And the pictures I got is I had a great opportunity back in 2015 to learn a technique called advanced muscle integration technique from a guy named Craig Bueller up in Salt Lake City, Utah. He's just outside of Salt Lake City, Utah. And a lot of people in Lubbock are familiar with AMIT because there's a lot of docs. Jared Carey is one of the top guys that brought it back to Lubbock. And he's one of the top guys in the United States with AMIT. And then he's kind of moved on to some different stuff. But I learned it back in 2015. And I got to go up to Utah. We went 1 weekend a month for 8 months. And we had the opportunity to go to the biology lab, the cadaver lab, at the University of Utah there in Salt Lake. And I don't even remember the guy's name. I should look him up. One of the best teachers I ever had a chance to be around. Just so knowledgeable about what he was doing. Now, I think he was actually one of the only non-PhD guys to be running an anatomy lab anywhere in the United States. He was that sharp. And it was great. And it was such a great experience to go up there. I learned more about glute function and stability and movement than in maybe 15 or 20 minutes than I did in my entire chiropractic education. And I got a great chiropractic education. I'm not saying that, but it was really good. And so the pictures I've got are from the lab. I took some pictures when we were in the lab, and I've got some pictures of the wrist and elbow, and I've got some pictures of the foot. And so I want to show some of those pictures tonight. I don't know if we've ever done that on this show or not, but I want to show some of those pictures to get us to understand that, because we had those conversations today, And I know there's a bunch of people out there that would really benefit from learning about that. Conversations we had today that were of relevance to us. One of them is about that. That was a big one. Um, um, I had a conversation with a new person that came to see me for Shockwave on their knees, and then after the first visit, they haven't quite decided whether or not they're going to do the Shockwave or not, and so they're still working on that. But they didn't know they were scheduled for a visit today to come in, and then they didn't really know for sure what, like, should they even come back if they haven't decided whether or not they're going to do the Shockwave on the knees. Do they need to come back and get adjusted? Is there anything else we can do? Should I just stop if I'm not getting the Shockwave? All those questions are in their mind, and I totally understand that. They don't understand exactly what we're doing, right? Well, you guys understand it. You guys understand it way better than someone that's brand new, that is unfamiliar with what we're doing. And this person's older, so they've gone. They have this preconceived idea about chiropractic and all that sort of thing. So um, it was like, I know you guys know, because orthopedics follow brain issues, right? We know that. We know that your knees didn't get bad until your brain quit firing properly. And I know that that some people have a hard time thinking about that and really understanding that, but just trust me, I'm a doctor. No, don't ever fall for that line. I was just kidding. I was just kidding about that. The we worked on it and we've tried to explain it, and I just want you to know it, right? So if I didn't have a Shockwave machine, like I didn't have for 20 years of my practice, is there anything that I could do for this person to be able to help their knees? And of course, the answer to that question is yes. Of course, there's lots of things we can do. Now, the Shockwave just speeds it all up. I mean, the Shockwave is great for the knees. I mean, we're having great success with what we're doing with using that on joints, shoulders, knees, hips, ankles. We're having great success with that. But there are things that we can do. And the things that we can do is work on the brain to get the brain to fire properly, so that the muscles fire properly, and then we can stimulate the muscles, and we can make sure that we remove the subluxations, and then we can get the joints to function better. We can get the muscles to hold better. We can increase the balance. That was one of the problems that this particular person was talking to me about. She said, a lot of times when I go to walk, I feel like I'm going off at an angle. I feel like I'm like moving sideways. And I was like, yeah. And you've got, that starts up here, right? That's at cerebellum. That's happening at the top in the brain. It's part of the brain that gives balance, coordination, and posture. It's like, wait, I'm walking off sideways. And it's like, okay, why are you walking sideways? What is the lack of input into the brain and the output of the brain, right? Those are the things those are the things that if you can really get that, man, to me it just is so liberating for your health. It's just like, I've got a brain, and I've got a body, and I've got input into that brain, and then I've got output coming out of that brain. There's no question that that's happening. There's input and output to the brain. And remember, we've used those terms afferent and efferent, right? Going out from the brain to the body's efferent. It doesn't matter what they're called. It's just a made up word anyway. And the going in. But if you were to say, if something was called, it was functional, and if I said to you it's dysfunctional, what would you think if I said that? If I said this whole thing is dysfunctional, like this school is dysfunctional, this operation is dysfunctional, this restaurant is dysfunctional, like what would you interpret that meaning to be? It's not functioning right, right? Like you could figure that out if I said that. We went into a restaurant, and I don't even know if dysfunctional is a word, but if I said it, you would automatically think this is not functioning right, right? So if I was to add dis in front of affrontation, and I was just like dys, or even if I said dis, disaffrontation, you would think to yourself, the wrong affrontation. And if you knew what affrontation meant, meaning the signals going from the body to the brain, you would just automatically say, wait a minute, disaffrontation would mess up my body. Like I wouldn't, if I'm not giving the brain the proper input, it happens every single day in the world. Communication between a husband and a wife. I told this story twice today. One of my ladies, speaking of conversations today, I love this lady to death, but she's brand new to the office. And one of my ladies, she was telling me about some supplement she was taking, and she said, it doesn't have any calories, it doesn't have any sugar, and we don't need that sugar. And I was like, yeah, you're right. And I said, what'd you have for lunch? And she said, I had a cookie. And she's in her 80s. And I was like, okay. I was like, what else? That's it. I just had a cookie. I said, well, what'd you have for breakfast? And she said, well, actually, I had a cookie for breakfast too. Okay. See, the good part about that is, boy, we got a lot of room for improvement. Like we can really help this lady move forward with her health, right? Because at 3:33 this afternoon, she's running on 2 cookies, a cup of coffee, and some water. That's it. And we all know in this office and on this show, we know fuel and activation, right? Fuel and activation. Well, the fuel is lacking in this particular body, right? The body, it's wrong. It's not going to function properly if we don't fuel it properly. And it's the same thing in the nervous system. It's not going to function properly if we're not firing the brain properly. If I don't communicate with Leslie, then Leslie and I get fussy with each other. And so what I was telling, that's what it reminded me. What I was telling that lady today is that time I got in trouble for putting gasoline in my mom's diesel Buick Park Avenue. Because Dad told me, hey, run down there and put some gas in your mom's car. That's exactly what he told me. And I was 16 years old. So what did I do? I got in the car, I drove down to the barns where we had gas tank, and I just drove that. I was listening to country music and thinking about nothing. What 16-year-old kids do sometimes. I wasn't thinking about what I was doing. I just did what I was told. And I went down there and I put some unleaded gasoline in my mom's car. And I started back towards the house, and all of a sudden Dad's driving 100 miles an hour down the dirt road, and he's honking the horn. And I'm like, what's the matter? And he gets there and he says, turn it off, turn it off. And I'm like, what? I turned it off. And he's like, did you just put unleaded gasoline in your mom's diesel car? And then all of a sudden, I knew I was in trouble. I was like, well, that's exactly what you told me to do, right? There was dysfunction in that communication. There was a disaffrontation somewhere in that communication. I did exactly what he told me to do, but it's not what he meant. And he wasn't thinking about it either, to tell the truth, because that's exactly what he told me to do. And neither one of us caught it, but I got in trouble for it. And then I got lectured about, can you read what this says right here? On that gas cap, he came around to the gas cap. He's like, what does that say right there? He's like, I said, it says diesel fuel only. And he's like, exactly. He's like, what does this say on this tank? And I said, it says unleaded. He said, come around here to the front. And we got around to the front. He said, what does that say right there? It says diesel. And I'm like, yeah, I get it, Dad. I got it as soon as you said, did you put unleaded in that diesel? I was like, yep, I get it. I knew I got it then. I didn't really need all the rest of the lecture to get it, right? But we had a lack of communication, which resulted in a problem. Basically is the short version of that story. We had a lack of communication that resulted in a problem. The expression of what I did was based on the lack of communication between me and my dad. And it was very clear what he said, but it's not what he meant. So what your body is trying to communicate with your brain, afferently, it's trying to send that signal to your brain and communicate with your brain. But if there is subluxation and interference between your body and your brain is going to get the wrong information, and your brain's going to go put unleaded gasoline in the diesel engine. It's going to send the efferent information back down to your body wrong. And it's not wrong based on what the brain processed. It was wrong based on the input from the body to the brain. That's where it was wrong. It was like the foot is not communicating to the brain properly. One of my ladies talked about slipping. She was walking across some concrete. She slipped, and as she was slipping she said there was some algae on the concrete. As she was slipping on the concrete, she planted her foot hard into the ground and ended up falling and hurting herself. Well, remember what AMIT is in the first place, Advanced Muscle Integration Technique, which don't worry about what that is because it doesn't, it's just a made up name, but what it is talking about a muscle that may be neurologically inhibited because it was taken beyond its capacity. That's basically what it means. You took a muscle beyond its capacity and it shut off. And I'll show it to you when we get into plantar fasciitis a little bit. I'll show exactly some of those tendons and how that works. But that right there is a shut off. Now the foot's not working right. And now from this point forward, we're not receiving the proper information from that particular area into the brain. Now the brain is trying to balance the body, and the imbalance, the altered balance, I should say, the altered output, it's not altered output, it's altered function. It's altered function based on disafferentation. The brain didn't make a mistake. The brain took the information it's getting, and then with the cerebellum is what maps all that stuff out and gives us a plan of movement. And it happens through the left brain and the right brain and the cerebellum, all just talking to each other all the time. Now what we've got is this disruption of input. I did exactly what my dad told me to do, but I did the wrong thing, right? I shouldn't put unleaded gasoline in a diesel engine, and I didn't pick it up, and Dad didn't pick it up. But what the end result was, the input that I got, it resulted in an action that was wrong. And that's what happens in the body. That's what happens in the body from knee, hip, spine, bottom of foot, wrist, elbow, shoulder, into the brain. Organ, same exact thing. Get your liver to start to cirrhose, eat too much fructose, eat too much sugar, eat too much fructose, drink too much alcohol, and get your liver to cirrhose. And then now all of a sudden, that nasty liver is now we got a problem with that nasty liver. And what do you think might happen in the middle of that? If that liver's not functioning properly, do you think the harmony of the body is going to be proper, or do you think we're going to have some sort of dis-ease in the body if we have that? Yes, we're going to have dis-ease in the body, lack of ease in the body when we have that type of thing going on, right? So those were great conversations that we had. So that was like 4 or 5 different people that I had those conversations with today. It was a great conversations about, look, this is the way it works. This is the way it works, the brain and the body talking to each other. So this particular lady, she didn't understand, is there anything you can do to help me besides Shockwave? And I'm like, well, I invested a lot of money into Shockwave because I've been told that it's an advanced way of treating a degeneration in your knee. But yes, for 20 years of the 21 years, I've been doing other things. And what we're going to try to do is we're going to try to fire the brain to get the brain to put the body back in order. We're going to try to strengthen the quads and the hamstrings. We're going to try to make sure that the foot is balanced, the hip is balanced. We're going to try to make sure that all that stuff is going on and get her the right fuel and activation and see if we can make her knees better. That's what we're going to do. Like, yeah. Wow, that was that was a lot of stuff right there. I hope you followed that. But that's chiropractic wellness every single day. It's like your entire body. We got all of you. I've got you from the bottom of your foot to the top of your head. I've got your diet, your exercise, your thought processes, your sleep, all of it. That's what wellness people do. I read some stupid article. I saw some stupid thing on Instagram today about some guy that got hurt in a chiropractic office. And you guys, we just went through that. And then there was some ER doctor on there talking about don't get adjusted. It was ridiculous. It was ridiculous. I'm like I saw it and I just was like, dude, like, come on. Like that. If that actually happened, there were circumstances, and the article said there were circumstances, and it wasn't even the chiropractor's fault and all this sort of thing, right? But that's not how it gets sold. And you hear that crap, and it's like, dude, I don't know what you're talking about. Like, that's not what happens in the clinic for 21 years and over 100,000 adjustments. That's not what happens in the clinic. What happens in the clinic is we're working on getting people well, and that's what we're doing. And you guys know it because a lot of you guys that listen to the show are the people that are getting well from what we're doing in the clinic, right? Amen. All right, enough of that. I saw a quick article. We got just a little bit of time before we get into the other part of it. I'll start with this article right here, and then we'll kind of move along. But it's great because it gives us a little bit of knowledge about. This is from Neuroscience. Neurosciencenews.com. I got a patient that sends me these articles. If you come across an article that you think is really cool about health, wellness, chiropractic, neuroscience, anything like that, feel free to just send me the link. I'd love to read it. But this one right here is how PTSD disrupts brain cell communication. A new study has examined brains affected by PTSD at a single cell level, uncovering distinct genetic alterations that may drive the disorder. It threw me out right there. The first part of it, distinct genetic alterations, doesn't take into consideration epigenetics, right? But I went along with it anyway. Researchers focused on the dorsolateral prefrontal cortex, a brain region tied to emotional regulation, analyzing individual cell nuclei to map communication differences across PTSD, major depression, and control brains. They found impaired signal. Listen to this sentence right here. This is so lovely. Right here. What do we say all the time? Okay? Healthy people inhibit. Healthy people inhibit. Right? Okay. They found impaired signaling in inhibitory neurons in PTSD. They found impaired signaling in inhibitory neurons. Okay, what does that mean? That means that you have a set of neurons that's job is to inhibit. They're not active. That's the majority of brain function. The brain function, trillions of synapses that are going on in the brain. Unbelievable things that are happening in the brain. The majority of brain function is not to cause action. The majority of brain function is to keep action from happening, is to inhibit. So they found impaired signaling in inhibitory neurons, neurons whose job is to keep you from doing something, has impaired signaling. So you got to think about it just a little bit from like a double negative right there. If an inhibitory neuron keeps you from doing something and you have impaired function of that neuron, then it won't keep you from doing something, so you're going to do it. You follow me? It's like the shaking thing with the older people that shake. They're not, right now, I am intentionally making my hand shake. I can stop it though. I can inhibit my hand from shaking. Or I can make my hand shake. People whose hands shake They're not causing it to shake. They just can't stop it from shaking. You get that? Okay. So in this particular article, they found impaired signaling in inhibitory neurons in PTSD, potentially explaining hyperarousal. Hyperarousal means too much arousal, hyperarousal symptoms, and opposing patterns of microglial activity in post-traumatic stress versus depression. Vascular endothelial cells in post-traumatic stress brains also show signs of dysfunction, possibly increasing stress hormone exposure. So this is when the inhibitory neurons have dysfunction, then they don't inhibit, which leads to hyperarousal, which leads to the inability to dampen your post-traumatic stress, which now leads to an expression that's wrong, right? It was interesting. I thought it was great actually. That just that part of it, and oh man, look at that picture right there. Like if you guys on the radio, you got to go check that out at Walk by Faith on the Facebook page. Like that's the brain. That's what I'm talking about right there. It's like, look at that. Like that is just like it's a symphony in there. It's like trillions of synapses going on in there. It's just unbelievable what's going on in your brain. Like that's a beautiful picture. And here's the cerebellum right down at the bottom down there on the back. That's that cerebellum that's not firing. Here's your brainstem. Information into the cerebellum, disruption into the cortex, causing imbalance. Now you walk sideways down the hallway. We got to take a break. You guys hang around. We'll be right back right after these messages. I'll let those guys get that done. Let me I got a text coming in right here. Let me just make sure. There we go. I had to get that done. Man, but look at that right there. Like if you look at that brain and you just, it's like, man, and this is neurosciencenews.com is what we're looking at right now. Man, there's a lot of stuff going on in there. There's a lot of stuff going on inside your head. That's what people say all the time. They're like, they say, Doc, do you think this is all in my head? Yes, I guarantee it's all in your head. Like you're not making it up, but it's in your head. Otherwise, you wouldn't even know it's happening. Right? That's what it is. That like there's a lot happening inside there. So that's a cool picture. That cerebellum, that's that balance part, that's that brainstem. All that stuff has to work together. This upper part, that above down, that upper top down control that we always talk about, where we're getting this cortex involved. This particular article is talking about this prefrontal cortex and this area, the front part of the brain that has to do with the emotions. I mean, it's pretty cool, I think. It's pretty cool stuff. I don't even know what I haven't even gotten through the rest of the article, but I think that's pretty cool stuff. I don't believe that. Now, maybe some people are predisposed to being a little bit of hyperarousal versus other people. I think we know people like that. Some people are more hyper-aroused than other people, but I don't think that. I don't think that should be. I would hate it if a person bought that and thought they were genetically, there was anything they could do about it, right? Like genetically, they just had post-traumatic stress. Because I don't think that that's true based on all the stuff like the body keeps the score. Remember, the body keeps the score. I learned a bunch about that stuff, and they taught us a bunch about that stuff. So, hang on one second. Let me get us back on the radio. Okay, everybody, we're back. This is Life with Jason Clemens, DC. We're going to get to, in the second half of the show, we're going to get to plantar fasciitis. And um, it it is one of the things we've gone over it before. I know we've done this show. We've done this show for 20 months now. I guess 21 months, getting close to it. And we've covered lots of things lots of times. And I think it's helpful to hear it multiple different ways and see multiple different pictures and just kind of go through different ideas so that we can really understand what's going on. And I think this particular thing is something that is confusing to people, and it causes a lot of issues. And I just want to break it down tonight. I want to just go slow. I just want to break it down. And the first thing that I want to do is I want to talk about how you say it, because that is one of the things that people get really confused about. Okay, so let's just talk slowly about it for a second, and let's just really see if we can get people to understand it. Well, and I'm going to show you some pictures, and I want to talk about the pictures, and I want to talk about how it works, and I want to talk about some of the distribution of it, and what we may have to pull up a few pictures, but the way that I say it, and maybe I'm not right either, right? Is I just say plantar fasciitis. That the fascia is the covering of the body. That's the inside the skin. There's fascia all the way through, from the bottom of your feet all the way to the top of your head. There's fascia. It's called fascia. Okay? And itis is inflammation of anything. Arthritis, iritis, nephritis, whatever you want to say. Cellulitis, that's another one. Anytime you have an itis, that's the inflammation part, right? So the itis is inflammation. And inflammation is the initial stage of the immune response. And why would you have an immune response? Because you have some sort of attack or damage. Right? So what we've got going on in any place in the body that we have inflammation is we've got some sort of attack or damage perceived by the immune system that's causing the immune system to respond and heat things up in that area. And that's a chemical reaction. Those are, there's cytokines, you may have heard those words, chemokines. There's different molecules that the body has at its disposal that anytime it needs to, it can just increase inflammation. It can just call on these particular types of molecules, and it can say, okay, I need this and this and this. Like if you were fixing to make pancakes, right? Like, which you won't ever do again, probably, but you might if you're having a really crazy day. But you would need some flour or some Bisquick or whatever you're going to make. If you're going to make them quick, you're not you're a new phase person, not an old timey person. You need some oil, you need some eggs, whatever the thing you need, right? You need these things in order to make a pancake. Well, the body, in order to make inflammation, needs some of those things. It needs that tumor necrosis factor or that interleukin, whatever, and it needs those particular things to make inflammation, and it's got it. And it could just call upon it. What is it that's doing that? Right? It's your white blood cells. It's your immune system. Those things, the cells of your immune system that are floating in and out of those tissues. They're looking at different types of things. They're looking, like neutrophils they're floating in and out of the bloodstream. They're going through your tissue. They're looking for anything that's attacking the body or anything that's damaging the body or any area of the body that's damaged. And they're going to work to try to clean that thing up. You sprain your ankle swells up. You get bit by a spider, you get a red circle around that whole thing, right? There's inflammation. We get that. I think everybody understands. I don't think everybody understands the mechanisms of inflammation, but I think everybody understands the idea of inflammation, right? You got something, and we also understand that very, very commonly, not always, but very, very commonly, inflammation is associated with pain or accompanies um, pain. Pain accompanies inflammation, I guess I should say. Right? Okay. If something's inflamed, it's probably causing irritation of the nerve. So that nerve that's running through there is right next to all of this chemical. It's like it's like you've got all this. It's like you got a spoon in the batter, right? You got your pancake batter, and all of a sudden you got a nerve. You got the spoon. You put it in the bowl, and you got all this batter, and it's like this. It's like the batter is going to get on the spoon, right? Well, the chemicals are going to get on the nerve, and they're irritating to the nerve. So what is the nerve going to do? The nerve is going to send that signal to the brain. The nerve is going to send the irritating signal to the brain, and it's going to tell the brain, we have chemical irritation down here. And then the brain is going to determine what that means and how emotional you are today and how much fuel it has to handle the problem and all of how much activation it's getting to handle the problem and all of the things that's going on. And then the brain is going to decide whether or not that hurts. That's where the pain part is coming in. The pain part is coming in the brain based on how the brain is going to determine what it means about the irritant in the foot. Pain is not in the foot. Irritation is in the foot. Pain is in the brain. Get that? You don't have pain in your foot. Your pain is mapped out from the map that's in your brain that shows your foot. And then your brain says, yep, there's irritation right there, and it pulls in your limbic system, and it pulls in your definitions of pain, and it pulls in whether or not you got any sleep last night, and it pulls in whether or not you're happy with your life or you're not happy with your life, and it does all that stuff together, and then it says, ouch, that hurts. And that's what's happening with this whole thing, okay? So inflammation, it can be anywhere in the body, and it usually has pain with it. So what we do is we just say, my foot hurts, right? That's what we say. My foot hurts. But we've got inflammation. And if you have inflammation, if you have itis in the fascia, you have fasciitis. It's pretty simple. Now, where's the fascia? The fascia can be anywhere over your whole entire body. You got fascia all over your body. In this particular case, it's on the plantar surface of your foot, which means the bottom of your foot. That's the plantar surface of your foot. So you have plantar fasciitis. You don't have elbow fasciitis. You don't have shoulder fasciitis. You don't have jaw fasciitis. You have plantar fasciitis from the plantar fascia that's inflamed. Okay? Okay. Now that we've kind of got that straight, what in the heck does that mean? Like, what is that? Okay. Now, this is, I'm going to warn you one more time. I'm going to show a picture that's that I took in the cadaver lab at Salt Lake City at the University of Utah. So if you got an objection to that or whatever, you don't want to see this foot, then look away or close your eyes or, change the channel or whatever. Because I want to show you what the bottom of the foot looks like underneath the skin. And I'm going to show you a couple different pictures. And they're not super great pictures, but this is what I had to work with. And let me see where they are. Hang on. There we go. Okay. All right. So this particular picture is what you can see right here. We're looking at the bottom of the foot. And right up here are the toes. So you can see the toes right up there at the top. There's the ball of the foot, and then that's where they started the dissection. And what they do a super good job of. This was so cool because we didn't have this same experience at Parker College when we went through cadavers for 30 weeks for 2 trimesters. We had gross anatomy 1 and gross anatomy 2. So for 30 trimesters, I was in the lab doing this same thing, but we had to keep our cadavers at the time in these tanks full of formaldehyde. It was nasty in there. It smelled bad. It was all kinds of issues with it, right? But they've advanced since 2002, and they've got these at the University of Utah. What they are able to do is save these in a little different level. So what they would take parts of the foot, like they go right from underneath the skin, and they would try to dissect the skin off and then show you what's at layers. They would do layers through the foot. Okay? And so what we've got here is we've got the toes, and then we've got the bottom of the foot, and you can see a little bit of a mixture right there. Let me change it and make it as big as we can. There we go. No, that doesn't really help. But nope, that didn't help either. Here. I don't know where I was. But hang on. Messed up my... Well, it's the best picture I can get right there is if we just swap these over. Okay. What we've got right here is there's tendons on the bottom, and you can kind of see this white stuff that is through there, and that would be the fascia. The fascia, we've got some tendon. The tendon is very, very white. This is very, very white. And there's some tendon right there. This might actually be some fascia that's underneath that. That's probably what that is right there. That's the fascia. It's a thick tissue. It's kind of tough. It's if you've ever eaten a steak and you bite through that where one muscle crossed over another muscle, and there's kind of that white stuff in the steak. It's kind of hard to chew through, right? That's the fascia. And that's what the bottom of the foot looks like. And that fascia is going to come up, and it's going to attach there basically at the ball of the foot, right below the toes, and it's going to run right down the bottom of the foot, and it's going to insert on the calcaneus. And that there's layers over the top of that, and there's layers that come around from the calcaneus now, your heel bone, and that come around to your Achilles, and they run all the way up your Achilles to the back of your knee. And then there's fascia that just keeps going from the back of your knee all the way up to your hip, crossing over up your hip, running through your lats, going through your shoulder, going all the way up over the top of your head. That fascia that's over the top of your head is actually one continuous piece that's on the bottom of your foot. And then there's attachment points along the way. Okay? So you've got this attachment point of the foot. You got it on the bottom of the foot. So let me show you the next picture, and where we can actually start to look at some more clearly. You can start to see where there's a tendon. Oops. There we go. Now we've got the tendons that are underneath that fascia, and these tendons are like a tendon attaches a muscle to a bone. That's what a tendon does. It attaches a muscle to a bone. So you don't the muscle. If you want to curl your toes up, right? If you want to push your foot down into the ground, if you want to pick your foot up, you've got tendons that are attached to the bone right there. And that tendon is long and skinny in the foot, and it comes all the way down and attaches to each one of those toes. It just splits, right? You can do the same thing with your arm. You know, if you just relax your fingers, and then you kind of put your thumb on your forearm, you can, and you just relax your hand, you can make your fingers bend. Like you can press the middle of your forearm, and you can make your fingers bend if you just relax your fingers right there. Because what you're doing is you're pulling down on that tendon, which is a very long strand that's coming from the muscle that's up around your elbow, and then it's going all the way down into your hand. in your foot, that muscle that controls those muscles that control the foot, a lot of them are up in the calf or around the side of your shin or on the front of your shin, not the bone, but the muscles that are around it right there. You got your peroneus muscles, your tibialis muscles, you got your soleus and your calf, your whole coming down into your Achilles, and there's a lot, your gastrocnemius, there's a lot of muscles that have to do with the way the foot moves. But there's not a lot of muscles in the ankle themselves. There are some, and I'm about to show you a picture of them. But there's mostly it's tendons down there, okay? And those tendons have attachment points. The tendons have attachment points. And inside an attachment point are receptors to the brain. That's the one thing that you guys, that we just saw that a second ago in that article. Where's that article? Post-traumatic stress article, right? In that post-traumatic stress article, that when you see these dots and we got a picture of the brain and it's all lit up, and we've got all these little dots that are in the brain right there. Let me make sure you can see that. Yeah, you can see that. All those little dots right there are neurons that have connecting points. That's the thing I always talk about Botox. It's like in nerve burning and all that sort of thing that people do. It's like, wait a minute, just look at this picture of the cerebellum, and there's nerves. You can see them right here, and you can trace them, and they'll come through here, and then they'll go right down through the spinal. They'll run right down through the brainstem and go right through the spinal cord, and they'll run down to the bottom of your spinal cord, and they'll synapse with another nerve, and it'll go all the way to the bottom of your foot. And there's receptors, there's thermostats in your foot. That's why it's like I say all the time, there's 2,500 per square centimeter in your fingertip. They're in your pads of your fingers. There's 2,500 receptors. I dare you to go just take a pencil and a ruler and just mark a 1 centimeter by 1 centimeter box. Make a square 1 centimeter by 1 centimeter and put 2,500 dots inside that box. They're going to be very, very little dots, right? Those are little bitty thermostats that are all connected to a nerve, and that nerve is in that brain right there. The other end of that nerve, maybe with a connection along the way, it's like maybe you got a long extension cord. You got 2 long extension cords plugged in together, but there's one end over there and there's another end over there. It's two of them, but they're plugged together, so it's functionally one extension cord. That's the same thing going on in the brain. Every one of these little lights that you see in this picture is connected to the body that's down below. That's why the afferent information, that's the foot sending the signal to the brain to one of these little dots. And that little dot that's in the brain is saying, oh, okay, I get what's happening at the foot. Like, I see what you're saying to me. It's like, it's going to the foot. And it's like, there's irritation down there, right? So the tendon itself, the tendon is attached to the bone, and when it's attached to the bone, there are receptors inside that tendon right there. And those receptors are feeding the brain. And if you stretch those receptors, they'll turn that muscle off. The brain will turn the muscle off. It'd be like, whoa, wait a minute. I don't want to pull that tendon off the bone. And that's part of what AMIT is. AMIT is Advanced Muscle Integration Technique. Advanced Muscle Integration Technique is taking trying to get the tendon to turn back on, trying to get the receptor to quit firing so that the brain turns the muscle back on, is basically what that is. And then there's another picture I want to show you that is, now we got tendons, but there are some intrinsic muscles in the foot, meaning there are some muscles that are in the foot, and those muscles are attached to that fascia. So these are like These are foot muscles in the bottom of your foot. And you can see them how there's like one of them right here is attached to that toe, and that tendon is coming down, and then these muscles are right here, and then there's a muscle on the bottom of the foot. And then if you go down here to the bottom of the picture, what you'll see is that white, that's the fascia right there that is cut away. And one thing that is really, really, that as a chiropractor, I'm very anti this. If you can see it, I don't know if you can pick it up on the picture itself, from what it looks like, on your phone or on your whatever you're watching right here. But if you could see that muscle that's right there, what you would see is it looks kind of jagged. Like that muscle looks jagged right there. And the reason it's kind of jagged looking is because the fascia of the bottom of the foot grows like root systems into the belly of that muscle. When someone goes in there and says, I think we should just cut the fascia off the bottom of your foot, it's like, whoa, hang on a second. Like, let's don't do that. Because what is that fascia? Where is it attached? It's not just free floating in there. It's actually grown into the muscle. When you cut the fascia on the bottom of the foot, you're going to shrivel up the fascia, and then that is going to pull on the muscle, and you're going to disrupt muscle function of that. That's where one of the guys where I went and learned AMIT was in a wheelchair because he'd had plantar fasciitis in one foot and then plantar fasciitis in the other foot. They decided to do the surgery, and now he can't walk because he's like, it's all jacked up. Dr. Bueller had to do all kinds of AMIT stuff to get him back to functioning. And by the time the first time I went up there, that first month, he was in a wheelchair. By the time I went there for the 8th month, he was a medical doctor that from Michigan or someplace. He had actually got his license in Utah, and he was seeing patients, and he walked in the room. And I was like, 8 months ago, that dude was in a wheelchair. And now he's up here seeing patients because he can walk now. So we got a complex set of things going on the bottom of that foot. Okay, we've got muscles, we've got tendons, we've got fascia. There's some ligaments that are holding all those bones together down there. We've got nerves running through the whole entire thing. There's a lot of things going on the bottom of that foot. Now, what happens is we lose the function of the foot for whatever reason. We lose one of the things that can happen is you can lose the arch in your foot. Your foot can go flat, or your foot can turn inward. They call it pronate. Your foot can pronate. You can lengthen the distance right there. That's lengthening the distance of the plantar fascia on the bottom. Now, one of the points I want to make before we get finished is a bone grows in the direction of force. It's called Wolff's Law. If I take the fascia that's connected to the heel bone, the calcaneus, and I pull on the fascia, just like if I pull on the skin, it's going to move, right? If you pull your skin, it's going to move. It's the attachment point where the tendon is attached and the fascia is attached to the bone, and it's that whenever we're stretching that and we're pulling on that tendon, and that tendon's attaching to that bone, we're pulling on that bone, and what's happening is your bone is growing towards the pull, and that's called a spur. That's what you would call a heel spur, is if you were pulling towards the bone is going to grow, but the heel spur is not painful. It's not the heel spur that's painful. It's the attachment point of the tendon to the bone that's inflamed. That's what's painful. You people say, well, I have a heel spur on my heel and it's killing me. And I'm like, no, it's not. Your bones don't hurt like that. It's not the spur that's killing you. It's the attachment point pulling on the bone. And the question is, why is the tendon pulling on the bone? It's because it's not functioning properly. And you can get that all the way up into the it doesn't have to just be on the bottom of the foot. You can see how these muscles are malfunctioning on, this is the big toe. And so you can see the muscles along the side of the foot, they can be malfunctioning, and you can have pain that's running on the inside of your foot from your big toe to your heel. You also are going to have, usually involved in this whole thing, is your Achilles tendon, which is on the back of the heel that's coming around, and that whole calf muscle, which is a couple muscles, but your calf muscle now is not functioning properly, and it's pulling on that tendon, and now we've got inflammation at the heel at the same time. So we've got inflammation from the Achilles, we've got inflammation on the plantar fascia, we've got inflammation where the tendon is pulling on the bone, and that's killing you, and your foot hurts, right? That's what plantar fasciitis is. It's the dysfunction of the foot causing inflammation and pain. And there's multiple ways you can treat it, but if you get the function of the foot back properly, you can decrease the inflammation and you can decrease the pain. I'm out of time for tonight. We'll pick it up tomorrow night and make sure that we cover it and get it exactly like we want it. And so that everybody is clear with that. I hope that was helpful. Hope you guys have a great evening, and I'll see you tomorrow night at 6.